So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started is that we are on the Zoom webinar platform, so you do not have the ability to unmute yourself, but you do have the ability to fully participate in the chat and the Q&A. And then we will have time for kind of discussion and some questions at the end, and we'll have some time for discussion, and there's an activity as well. So if you do feel comfortable and want to fully unmute yourself, what you can do is actually raise your hand, and then I will be able to let you unmute yourself and you can talk and we can have that dialogue as well. It's just a little bit more of a controlled environment for our webinar platform that we use here at our center. And then I also want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and the documents, the resources, the PowerPoint, and the recording from today will be up on our Illinois Workforce Academy website, typically within 48 hours, depending on any editing we have to do. And then it will also be on the Illinois WorkNet website as well. Tomorrow, you will receive a follow-up email from Zoom, and in that follow-up email, there will be a link to that website that has all of the materials and the recording from today. And also there will be a link to a follow-up survey. And if you have just a couple minutes out of your workday, we would greatly appreciate your participation in the follow-up survey, just so that we can get some feedback for our PD committee as we're continuing to develop PD, especially for FY23. So there's a couple questions on that survey, kind of asking if there's anything in the future that you are interested in us doing some professional development on. So we would love to hear your ideas from the system. So again, today's topic is listening to understand and solution creation, tips for active listening and problem solving. Again, my name is Kirsten Bayer. I am the Digital Communications Manager at the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, otherwise known as ICSPS. Hopefully you have heard a little bit about us if you've attended these webinars before, or if you attended the WIOA Summit. We are who put that on. It is quite the acronym, but I know we're all used to all of our acronyms here in the system, right? So ICSPS is where I currently work. I currently hold a bachelor's and a master's degree from Illinois State University in public relations and communications. For my master's degree, I focused on communication pedagogy, media literacy, website accessibility, and group work and group think. So a huge portion of part of the research that I did was regarding listening and empathetic listening, which is what today's webinar is about. So just a little bit about me as your presenter. And we're going to start off with our beginning polls that we do every Workforce Wednesday webinar. So first, I'm just going to ask, where's your local area? So if you could go ahead and answer that for me, it's just for our analytical purposes for our team. And I do apologize, I am going to keep my camera off today because, as we all know, it's summer. And when it's summer, everybody likes to go outside and do yard work, right? So I was outside doing yard work with my husband a couple weekends ago. He owns a lawn care business. And I got poison oak. So not fun at all. And it is spread all over my neck and even kind of on my face a little bit. So I'm going to keep my camera off today to just spare you my poison oak face. So I do apologize for that. Normally I love having my camera on so I can actually interact with everybody. And I know that typically makes for a little bit more fun of a presentation, but I don't think you would all want to see my poison oak. Yes, Lucas, poison oak is no joke. I did not receive hazard pay. I should let him know that though. That would be nice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So most of you are joining us from Chicago or Northern Illinois, but some of you from Central Illinois as well. I'm joining you from Decatur, Illinois, where I'm working from home today. But our center is in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois. So if you're from Central Illinois, welcome. And then a couple of you from South and even a couple statewide. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Our next poll that we just want to know is, which WIOA partner do you best represent? So if you best represent Title I, II, III, or IV, or another WIOA partner, stakeholder, or a state or local workforce innovation board. And while you're answering that poll, I do apologize if I pause for a second throughout the presentation. I'm just taking a drink of water. I know you can't see me since I don't have my camera on, so. Got a lot of Title I folks today, which is awesome. And some from Title III as well, and Title IV, folk rehab. Great. Give everyone a couple more seconds here. Looks like it's slowing down, so I'll share the results. Most of you are joining us from Title I, so welcome. I do a lot with Title I. I work a lot with Title I partners, so I'm very familiar with Title I and Title III and IV. I'm trying to dig deeper into everything that you do. You all do a lot. So welcome everyone, and welcome to our other WIO partners and stakeholders as well. Just want to thank you all for joining us today. Okay, so a little bit about today. Today's agenda is we are going to cover types of listening and then active listeners versus passive listeners, benefits to active listening in our workplace environments, the 3 A's of active listening, the art of listening in virtual teams, because I know most of us are still virtual on some capacity. It's either a blessing or a curse coming out of this pandemic, right? So we'll dig more into that. And then we'll do, potentially if we have time, we'll do a listening activity to see how well of an active listener you truly are. And then we will talk about some action steps and how you can implement the information in this presentation into your workplace. I did forget to mention actually that we do have live closed captioning on. So if you need to turn that on, live transcript for note-taking purposes, or if you need to turn that on for accessibility reasons, please feel free to do so. You can save the transcript as well if you need to do so. So first, we're going to start off with a poll. So do you think that we spend more of our time writing, reading, talking, listening, eating, or sleeping? And this is multiple choice. And I accidentally forgot to delete waking. So you can take that out. But do we spend most of our time, more of our time in general, not necessarily waking, but all of the time that we spend alive on this earth, do we spend the most of it writing, reading, talking, listening, eating, or sleeping? Okay, we got a couple more filtering in here. Looks like it's closing down, shutting down here, slowing down. Okay, so I'm going to share the results with all of you. So most of you said that we spend the most of our time sleeping, and then we were kind of tied between listening and talking. So actually, if you answered sleeping or listening, you were correct. So we spend most of our waking time communicating, right? But we spend most of our time alive on this earth actually sleeping, which I know we have no complaints about that, right? Who doesn't love a good nap or a good full night's rest? But I know sometimes those are far and few between for all of us. But we do spend most of our time sleeping on this earth. But our waking time, the time where our eyes are open, we spend most of that time communicating. So we are constantly communicating. And there are some theologists and professors that would probably argue with me and say that there are times where we're not communicating, but I would argue, and I did a lot of thesis work on this for my master's degree, that we are constantly communicating. Even when you're sleeping, you are communicating. But definitely when we are awake, we're in constant communication, right? So we spend most of our waking time communicating. We acquire knowledge, we develop languages, we learn our professions, we enhance our relationships, both in the workplace and personal. We communicate respect through listening. So people spend 70 to 80% of their day engaged in some form of communication, and about 55% of that 70 to 80 is devoted to listening. So out of all of our waking time that we're spending communicating, the thing that we do the most is listen, actually, which is really interesting to people because a lot of people would say, oh, we probably spend the most time talking, right? Or like if you know yourself and you call yourself a chatty Kathy, no offense to any Kathys, my mom's a Kathy and she's very chatty. We love her. But if you call yourself a chatty Kathy, you would probably argue you spend the most time talking, right? Or maybe even eating, but we actually spend the most of our waking time listening. We're listening to podcasts, we're listening to music, we're listening to TV, we're listening to webinars, right? We're listening to other people talk, meetings, all that stuff that we are constantly doing when we are awake. So kind of another quick activity for you in the chat or just like on a scratch pad or both. Why is knowing, like, why do you think, in your opinion, knowing how to listen effectively is important in the workplace? Like, why are we doing a professional development session on listening? We all know how to listen, right? It's a pretty learned behavior and concept that we've learned since we were children. So why is knowing how to listen effectively important, specifically in the workplace? Darcy says it's so easy to misunderstand people. Christine says, so we can do our job more effectively. Abigail says, because it shows you care. Amy says, to save time and money. Absolutely. Ethan, understand and not to wait to react. Anna, we can be so distracted due to multitasking. 100%. Lucas, to overcome biases, for sure. Alexis says it helps to reduce error down the line. And Kathy says to avoid confusion and conflict. Yes. So active listening, thank you so much, all of you, for your participation in that activity. So active listening in the workplace promotes awareness, it promotes mindfulness, and it promotes attention to detail. And it can help improve our working relationships and understand our tasks and grow both professionally and personally. Active listening, I would argue, is a life skill, and active listening is a transferable skill. So it's not only transferable to the workplace and your personal life, but like future workplaces or those personal relationships with your coworkers that you might develop or want to develop. Rena says effective communication begins with listening. Absolutely. I would 100% agree. If you don't have the ability to be an active listener, you are going to create confusion and conflict, right, Kathy? You are going to have errors in the workplace. You are going to have preconceived biases that maybe you're not even aware of, but because you don't have the ability to actively listen and you're not making that conscious effort to do so, you are going to be distracted due to multitasking. You are going to be more than likely to misunderstand somebody. We are going to waste time and money, right, Amy, if we don't know how to actively listen. We talked about how actively listening, it helps us improve our working relationship, and it really is a transfers respect to that person, right? So it shows that we care, like Abigail said. It is so easy to misunderstand people, and so being able to actively listen and have that transferable skill is so crucial to our workplace. Sherry says we are here to bring consensus and learn not to compete or dominate. I love that, Sherry. Absolutely. And active listening, I think, can definitely help with that. So thank you so much, all of you, for participating in that. So first, we're going to cover kind of like the 3 types of listening. Listening is often the only thing needed to help someone. Just a little bit, I guess, of relationship advice. But whenever I've had a long day and I come home from work and I just need to vent, right? I'll just start going off on a tangent. I'm very much like my mom, the chatty Kathy that I talked about earlier. I like to talk. I'm a chatter. And so that's kind of how I decompress, right? I talk about my day. I don't know if any of you are like that too. But my husband, what he would used to try to do was he would always like interrupt me, and it was frustrating because I'm like, I don't need you to fix it, right? I just need you to listen. So now one of the things that he does, and maybe you guys do this with some of your personal relationships too, or even in the workplace, I think it would be a great practice to put into effort. Is the fact that whenever I start going on one of my little tangents, I'm decompressing or someone's made me mad or whatever, and I'm venting to my husband about it, he'll say, do you want me to just listen or do you want me to fix it? And I love that he says that, because sometimes, and probably about 99.9% of the time, I don't really need him to fix it, right? I just want to leave the situation alone, or I can fix it myself, but I just want to vent to him about it just to like get it off my chest. So typically listening is often the only thing that we actually need to do to help someone, right? The first kind of listening that we utilize when we are active listening is comprehensive listening. And this is where we're gaining knowledge. So there's a purpose. So for example, listening to this webinar right now, your purpose is to gain knowledge about active listening. So you are comprehensively listening right now. Hopefully you're listening to me. And then critical is our second kind of listening, which is where we are evaluating. So we are evaluating what we're listening to. We're making judgments on what you're hearing. So like if you're listening to this webinar right now, for example, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't really agree with that, or I have a different opinion than that, or you're listening to your boss speak and you're like, that doesn't really make sense. I'm going to need to ask her to clarify it. So you're critically listening, right? Like you have your own thoughts running through your head as you're listening to that person, and you're critiquing what they're saying, or maybe like filling in the blanks of what they're saying where you don't understand something, or thinking about what you need to say next to them. So that's that critical thinking component. And critical thinking can actually potentially be a barrier. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a future slide. So then our next type of listening that we do is empathetic listening, which you've probably heard of this, but just that ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. For example, if someone tells you that their dog dies, or a family member is sick, or even good news, happy news, like someone tells you they got married or a baby is born, like being able to empathetically listen to that and show and share and show that emotion with that other person really just shows you care, kind of what Abby was talking about, right? So it's important that we understand and break these down, because it seems so easy. And I don't want to say that, but like when someone's like, oh, do you know how to empathetically listen? Your answer probably is like, yeah, I know how to be nice to people, right? But it's so important that we break these down and we truly understand these concepts, because if we don't understand them, we can't put them into practice. We can't make a conscious effort to choose to do these things, right? I always say that everything in life is a choice, and choosing to active listen to another person or to a webinar, like for all I know right now, you all could be working on other things and answering emails. And some of you probably are, because I can't see your faces, right? And you can't see my face, right? But you are choosing, hopefully, to actively listen to this content, right? In hopes to comprehensively listen and gain knowledge and learn something at the end of the webinar, right? So I always say everything is a choice. And so knowing how to comprehensively listen and breaking these down, right, we can better choose in the future to actively listen using these 3 different types of listening. So active listeners versus passive listeners. So passive listeners are like tape recorders, okay? They record the words, but they miss the intent and they miss underlying reasons for the information. So if your speaker is providing a clear message, listeners will probably hear most of what is said, right, on a typical nature. Passive listeners are typically more distracted. So if you are a passive listener, you are someone who is checking your email right now. You are someone who's looking at your cell phone right now. Maybe you're going over your to-do list in your head, or a different activity different than what you're listening to pulls your focus from the speaker. Typically, we see a lot of passive listeners during this virtual world, right? Where we're meeting with people on Zoom calls and we're meeting with people on the phone and on computers, and we have that ability to multitask. We have that ability to get distracted. So we find ourselves being a passive listener. I myself am completely 100% guilty of that, right? Because you're listening to somebody talk on a meeting and you're paying attention, and then an email comes in and it's a fire that you have to put out, and it's urgent and you need to take care of that. And so you answer the email really quickly, and then you miss something that was said. And we all are guilty of that, I think, right? Especially over the last 2 years. So we would be considered a passive listener, and you're not always a passive listener, right? Sometimes different days are better than others, and you're able to be a great active listener one day and more of a passive listener the next day, depending on how much you're juggling. And that we understand 100%. But it's important to know, like today is going to be a passive listening day, right? I'm so happy this meeting is being recorded, or we're taking notes from this meeting. I need to make sure I read over those later, because I was passively listening to that content. I wasn't able to give it my full attention. So that's kind of the blessing of this virtual world, right? Everything's recorded. Everything has live transcript or closed captioning. Everything is typically taken notes that are sent out after meetings, right? Or agendas at least. And I think people are definitely a lot more empathetic to answering questions or clarifying things now in this virtual world, because we do understand that different things are taking our attention. And depending on your perspective on that, it could be, bad or good. But active listeners are people who are actually engaged with the speaker through nonverbal cues, such as eye contact, or they restate things or paraphrase what they heard. Like Amy, you asking that question right now in the chat is you being an active listener. So thank you for that. And I will address your question here in a second. But the speaker acknowledges it and they listen, and the cycle kind of repeats as new information is introduced. So active listeners are engaged with the speaker. A huge thing that you'll see a lot of presenters try to do, and I tried to do it already, right, is to promote the active listening, right? To help engage the audience, like having polls and having our little chat discussions that we do on these webinars. That is helping me promote your active listening skills. And so you're engaging with me as the speaker when you're typing in the chat and when you're answering those polls. In person, or if we all had our videos on right now, I would be able to see that you're actively listening through nonverbal cues, such as your eye contact and like nodding your head and things like that. So active listening, psychologists Carl Rogers and Richard Farson in 1957, which was a long time ago, we're in 2022, in a paper titled Active Listening, first coined the term active listening. Okay. They wrote in their paper that active listening is an important way to bring about changes in people. So if we don't have the ability, the way that I interpret that is that if we don't have the ability to actively listen, right, we don't have that transferable skill ingrained in us, then how are we ever supposed to bring change to people? And that is our whole workforce system, right? Isn't our workforce system here to bring about change in people's lives? Oops, let me go next. So anyways, that's how I interpreted that. But in their quote, they indicate how clinical and research evidence clearly shows it as one of the most effective agents for individual personality change and group development, and also how active listening brings changes in people's attitudes towards themselves and others, shaping their basic values and personal philosophy. So I think that the way that Carl Rogers and Richard Farson, all the way back in 1957, they are the ones who first coined the term active listening. I still think it reigns true today, right? Active listening is how we bring change in people's lives. And that is what we're here to do in the workforce system. Whether you are on that higher scale or you are on the closer you're, in an LBA or whatever, working with those individual people out in the public, your ability to be an active listener is how you're bringing change in those people's lives. And that is our mission. That is our goal for the whole workforce system. I think I can speak for everybody when I say that. So next, we're going to move on to benefits to active listening in the workplace. So we kind of already talked a little bit about some benefits, right? Like when we did our chat and Scratchpad and why you all said that you thought it would benefit, active listening benefits us in the workplace. But the first thing that I really want to touch on is that active listening and the transferable skill to be able to actively listen, is building trust. If you want to build trust, you need to be a good listener. Building relationships, active listening can help us establish trust, rapport, and effective communication among our coworkers. You and your coworkers, your employees, if you're a manager or you're on a higher level, are happy when you meet each other's respective goals. So for an employer or for your manager, it is the organizational success for the employees. It's the tasks and the objectives that they are assigned to complete. And then when they complete them, right, they are happy when, hopefully your manager is happy when you complete a task or an objective. And it is therefore very vital to have trust, right, in each other for a healthy work experience. If you are a manager and you don't trust your employees, or if you're an employee and you don't trust your manager or your supervisor, that can create a very toxic work environment, right? Raise your hand if you can raise your hand here on, I think, right, on webinar or type in the chat or whatever. But if you've ever had or worked in a toxic work environment, right? I know I'm raising my hand really tall right now. Right before I worked where I currently am working at ICSPS, I worked in a very toxic work environment. And I will say that it has helped me learn that I absolutely know what I do not want in a work environment. And the reason for that is because we didn't have that trust between my coworkers and my manager. So being able to actively listen builds trust, and it's a two-way street, right? It helps us be aware of the fact that we need to build trust because we have to tick the following off. When you actively listen, the way that you build trust is you are lending an ear. You are being honest and supportive. You are being non-judgmental. You have healthy communication skills. And so you are communicating all of those things just by actively listening. And that helps build trust, right? To tick off all of those points, to be able to lend an ear, to be to be able to communicate that you are lending an ear, you are being honest and supportive, you are being non-judgmental, that you have healthy communication skills, you can communicate all of those things that you are that kind of person in the workplace and in your personal lives, even by just actively listening. And that helps build trust. You have to have this understanding because this can all be developed by just being able to actively listen. And this will help you when you are aligning your words with your actions in the workplace. And then that helps build trust overall. Absolutely, Abigail helps you learn how not to be a boss when your boss is toxic. I can 100% understand that. Okay, so another benefit to active listening in the workplace is obviously productivity, right? We talked about saving time and money. Time is money, and we all know that, and we're all working, hopefully, to make a difference in the workforce system, but also we're working to pay our bills, right? No secret. So we need that productivity, right? The more productive we are, the more of an impact I can call you Abby. Okay, great. The more productivity we have, the more of an impact we can make in the workforce system, the more change we can make. And, we are there ultimately to be productive employees and a part of the system. Active listening has countless benefits when it comes to employee productivity. When higher management does not hear, higher management isn't actively listening, employees' views or ideas it actually fuels employees' resentment and lowers productivity, right? We are seeing a huge influx of this. Like, I don't know if any of you are on LinkedIn. If you are, you can follow me. But if you are on LinkedIn, you've probably seen it all over your LinkedIn newsfeed. This huge, like, they're calling it, right, the Great Resignation. That's what they're calling it. I don't know who coined that term, but we're seeing this because people are coming out and it's becoming this huge social push that employees really are resenting their employers because they're not listening to them, actively listening to them. They're not listening to their views and ideas. And that's creating that resentment. And ultimately, it's lowering productivity and creating that toxic work environment. So being able to actively listen, whether you are just an employee or whether you are a manager, you are making an impact, right? And giving that proper feedback and actively considering your coworker, your manager, your employees' views and ideas are vital for a healthy workplace and healthy performance. Having said that, it's also important to assure that your internal communication is solid. Only then can you develop a culture of mutual trust and understanding. It is always a two-way process, right? And that's really where a lot of people in the workplace or in the workforce just struggle because it's a two-way process, right? But let me tell you this, you can only control what you can control, right? You can only choose and control your behaviors. So that's where we start, right? We start by ourselves changing and choosing to be active listeners to create more productivity in the workplace. So another benefit to actively listening in the workplace is to help resolve those conflicts and reduce that misunderstanding. Again, we talked about that as well. Like, there's so much misunderstanding and communication in both the workplace and our personal lives, or when you're dealing with customers in the workforce system. And we need to listen and understand and then act. And so conflicts and mishaps are inevitable in any workplace, in any relationship, right? Whether it's a working relationship, personal relationship, you're going to have conflicts, you're going to have fights, you're going to have issues that arise. I don't care how well you get along with people or how much you love your boss, you're going to be frustrated with them at times, right? The reason for this can vary from a minor misunderstanding to maybe a major debacle or someone majorly dropped the ball or whatever. But misunderstandings and different viewpoints or a lack of recognition often creates conflicts in the workplace. So even if you do have a misunderstanding or a different viewpoint from somebody or an argument or somebody dropped the ball, if you don't recognize that, that can even go ahead and create more conflict in the workplace. So there is nothing, and I truly believe this, you guys. I went to school for 6 years for communication. I work in communications now for our center. And I also teach communications on the side. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but I adjunct teach at Richland Community College, teaching public speaking and communication courses as well. So I truly believe that there is nothing that good communication skills cannot resolve. I truly believe that. If you are not on board with that, get off this webinar. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I truly believe that there is nothing good communication cannot resolve. And I think we've kind of established that, right? In your feedback that you were giving me earlier with the chat and the scratch pad activity. And when I say good communication, I mean active listening. Okay. Good communication, I think, I'm not sure who said it, but someone said earlier that, oh, Rena, effective communication begins with listening. Could not agree more. When I say good communication, I mean active listening. Often we fail at active listening. I fail, you fail, everybody on here fails at active listening. We fail to understand and respect other people's points of view because it's hard. It is so hard to see things from other people's perspectives. When you really think about it, it's not in our nature to see things from other people's perspectives. We are human beings. We are selfish, right? We're selfish in nature. And it's hard to see things from other people's perspectives. And that is why learning how to actively listen is a transferable skill. That's why I say that, because it is a choice. It is an active, conscious choice to see something from someone else's perspective. It is an active, conscious choice to actively listen. Our sense of self-righteousness is what interferes with our ability to see other people's perspectives. Like I said, we are selfish in nature. And so we have to choose not to be. Actively listening helps in recognizing other people's perspectives and feelings, and it helps us appreciate them. This ability to actively listen not only helps in resolving conflicts, but it also helps foster a culture of respect. And that's what we want in our workplaces, right? Oops. Oh, goodness gracious. Wow, I don't know what I did there. So sorry, everybody. Bear with me here. I was on my trackpad and it wigged out. Okay, I think we're where we're at. Yeah. Okay, so strong work relationships. It is important to form healthy working relationships in the workplace for a healthy work experience, right? A study that was conducted by Faye Dole in 2003 showed that there are two types of listening. There's listening to understand and there's listening to respond. How many of you have ever heard of that? You probably have. This is kind of where that critical listening can become a barrier, right? Because if you are critically listening to someone, you're probably thinking like what you need to reply next, what you need to ask them next, how you need to clarify what they just said, right? So you are listening to respond. And that's where that critical listening can kind of become a barrier. And we have to be conscious of that. People who listen to understand form better relationships and they're more empathetic in their approach. The same holds for our working relationships. The more members in our workplace that follow the listen to understand approach, the better work relationships they will form. You might not know all your coworkers on a personal level, and you might only know them on a professional level, and that's totally fine. But that does not mean that we cannot listen to understand and empathetically listen to them on that professional level. So it can develop strong work relationships, and that's the huge benefit to active listening. Active listening can also develop self-empowerment. Keep calm and listen on. Self-empowerment helps you build your own confidence and helps you yourself let go of your own agendas. When you practice active listening and you understand why it's beneficial for you in the workplace, you can expand your perspective in that direction and empower yourself. You can become more aware of your work environment, and you can communicate with your peers and members of your title or your organization with way more ease and confidence. Let me tell you, being able to actively listen and knowing that you have that skill, that will really shoot your confidence up, because you know that if there is a conflict, if there is a misunderstanding, you know that you did your part to mitigate that, right? To resolve that, right? To help build, you know that you are doing your part to help avoid that toxic work environment, to help build a positive one. So that is so self-empowering. And I think, when we think about active listening, we only think about, I need to know how to actively listen for the other person, right? But you also need to know how to actually listen for yourself. And it's so self-empowering, and it helps build your own confidence in yourself and your own ability to see other people's perspectives and let go of your own agendas. It just helps you grow as a person in the workplace and personally as well. So next I want to move on to talking about practicing active listening, right? We know what active listening is. We've defined it. We know why it's great, right? Why it's a benefit in the workplace. I want to talk about how we practice, consciously choose to practice active listening, right? That's what we've been talking about this whole time. And hopefully I'm drilling it into your heads. We need to actively choose to pay attention. by making eye contact, giving the speaker your full attention, avoiding distractions, and avoiding thinking about what you will say next, trying to avoid consciously that listen to respond mentality. I actually went to a conference last year, and the keynote speaker said something that has stuck with me will probably literally stick with me forever. She said that before she listens to somebody, or before she asks somebody a question, or before she walks into a meeting, she'll walk in and she'll sit down and she'll tell the presenter, I just want to let you know that if you ask me a question or if you talk to me, that I am listening to understand. I am not listening to respond to you. So it might take me a second to respond. And maybe that might come off as rude. So I'm just warning you, right? That when you're talking to me, I am listening to understand you. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next. So when you stop, I need, like 30 seconds to come up with my answer. And she will say that to people, and she's like the CEO, or she was really high up at Netflix or something. So I thought that really stuck with me. So that's kind of where that seek to understand comes in as well, that third bullet point. But we want to make sure that we're paying attention. Even on these webinars, even when you have your camera off, close out of your email, right? Put your automatic replies on. I do that all the time. I will put my automatic replies on and say, I'm in a training, I'm in a webinar. I will not respond until 11 a.m. or 11:30 a.m., whatever. If you need immediate response, or if you need immediate attention, contact this person or contact this email, right? I do that all the time because it is so easy to be distracted by other things. Use your body language to show that you are listening. I know we're not on camera right now. I'm kind of being a hypocrite. Please bear with me. I promise I have a good excuse, but if you are able to be on camera in these webinars, be on camera. Don't feel like, if you're working from home, don't feel like you have to have your cameras off. Most of the time when I'm working from home, I'm just wearing a regular shirt and I put my glasses on. I don't really put makeup on. And you know what? Nobody really cares, right? But I'm able to use my body language to show that I'm listening because I have my camera on. The speaker is likely reading your body language just as you should be reading theirs. So making sure that your posture is open and inviting, and that you're using facial expressions, and that you're nodding occasionally, things that you probably do without really thinking about it. But if you're just actively trying to pay attention, your body will kind of follow. Seeking to understand what the speaker is saying by reflecting on the information. Paraphrase what you've heard and ask questions to clarify any points that you may not fully understand. I think a lot of times that, a misunderstanding comes from our direct nature as human beings to take things the wrong way. I don't know about any of you, but I have one of my friends, I cannot talk to her over text, right? Because I don't know why. We've been friends for a long time. So maybe that's why. But anything that anybody says, we can't hear each other's voice. We can't hear each other's tone of voice, right? We can't see each other's facial expressions, body language over text. So we either have to use a lot of emojis in our text messages, or we just have to talk on the phone. Because there is just a lot of misunderstanding when we just text each other. And it's just our nature, right, to take things the wrong way. And, there's probably some deep psychological reason for that. I'm not sure why. But if we choose to actively listen and seek to understand and, paraphrase what that person just said, ask those clarifying questions, that's going to mitigate so much misunderstanding. Also, something that I struggle with, this is actually, if you've heard of, what's your toxic trait, if you've heard of that going around on social media, if anyone's ever asked you that, what's your toxic trait? It's like a trait that you need to work on. My toxic trait is that I am an interrupter. I love to interrupt people, and it is something I'm actively working on. Don't interrupt the speaker. And I'm saying that to myself as much as I am saying that to all of you. Hold any questions that you have until they have finished each point. That's what I love about Zoom, though, is like sometimes I'll have a question and I don't want to forget it. So I'll just like type in the chat, which is what you guys have been doing. And then the presenter can just get to it when they get to it, which is so nice. But in person, like just bringing a piece of paper to an in-person meeting or conference or whatever, and just writing down your questions. So that way you don't lose your question, but you're also not interrupting the speaker as well. That's something I've been trying to do, like on webinar or on meetings, like on Zoom. Instead of interrupting somebody, I have like my notes app up on my computer, and I'll just like type out my question really quickly, and then I'll ask them kind of at the end or when they've paused. So not interrupting the speaker is huge to practice active listening. And don't try to take perfect notes. Only write down like keywords or phrases or underline things when you have close questions or you need that clarification. Because if you sit there and write out like a whole sentence, you're not actively listening anymore, right? So take a moment later after the meeting to kind of fill in those notes, or like, that's why I love Zoom meetings so much, because of live transcript, and you can save the live transcript. And that way you can go back and like copy and paste that to your own notes and kind of delete what you don't want and whatever. And usually I do that after every single meeting or webinar I'm on. And it takes me maybe like a minute out of my day to do that, because everything is already right there on the transcript that's been said in the presentation. And then I'll just like kind of delete the things that are not what I need, and keep the things that are. And then I'll just like copy and paste them to my own personal work notes. So don't try to take perfect notes either. Take that moment later, just a minute out of your day. I usually block out the last 30 minutes of my day. Every single day I block it out to do like little tasks like that, follow up on email, things like that. I don't let anybody schedule meetings the last 30 minutes of my day. I don't talk to anybody the last 30 minutes of my day unless I'm responding to an email. And that's when I take that time to wrap up those notes and fill in more details to remember what my meetings were about that day, or what that speaker said, or whatever. And then responding appropriately, be honest. That is so hard in the workplace, I think, because sometimes we are really afraid to be honest. But be honest, state your opinions respectfully. Of course, you don't want to attack the speaker in any way, but be honest, state your opinions, state your points of view, because you're not giving the other person the opportunity to actively listen to you. And you're not giving your manager or the other coworker the opportunity to show that they're actively listening to you by like understanding your points of view if you aren't willing to give them, right? So be honest and state your own opinions as well. And you want to respond appropriately, of course. The 3 A's of active listening is what we're jumping into next. I'm just checking the chat really quickly. Amy, I've written down questions, and later in the presentation, they have answered my question. Yep, see, so, and that's so important too. Like, I think that a lot of times that happens to a lot of us. And so if you would have interrupted them, it would have been, might have thrown the presenter off their game, or that can be frustrating, as a presenter. So I think that happens to us a lot. So that's a really good practice, Amy. So the 3 A's of active listening is what we're jumping into next. The first A is attitude. So most of the successful people I've known are the ones who do more listening than talking. And Bernard Baruch said that. Attitude is a feeling of emotion that comes from understanding that we must be respectful towards what others say about a fact or a state or a topic. Understanding that we can all learn something new from others, even if we have strong beliefs or feelings prior to the topic. When we respect everyone, we tend to look beyond our preconceived notions, our preconceived perspectives, right, that we've talked about. And that in turn helps us become better active listeners. If you currently are working in the workplace and you do not have the attitude that you can still learn something new from other people, even if you're an expert on that topic. Like, I'm learning something from all of you right now by you just typing in the chat, right? Even if you consider yourself an expert on that topic, if you don't have the attitude that you can still learn every single day, about whatever it is, I'm going to need you to change your attitude. We need to have that attitude, that feeling, that understanding that we need to respect what others have to say, and that we can still learn something, even if we already have a strong belief about that, or a strong knowledge about that, or strong feelings about that. Because when we respect everyone else, you're going to find yourself realizing like, wow, I actually didn't know that, right? About that. And I thought I knew everything about that topic. So when we respect everyone, we tend to look beyond our own perspectives, and that just really eliminates that misunderstanding. It shows empathy, all the things that we've been talking about, all those benefits of active listening. So first and foremost, if you don't have that attitude, you need to get on board, change your attitude. Hopefully you already do. The second A of active listening is attention, right? We've talked about this a lot. To be a good listener, you have to have a good attention span, but it's a lot easier said than done. I know, Amy, you talked about like our passive listeners. Do they have ADHD? I am not medically inclined to diagnose anyone with ADHD. I think that passive listeners are completely different than someone who struggles with ADHD. I personally know that there are days where I 100% am a passive listener. I have other things going on. I have other things on my mind, right? And that's why I said I go and I try to save the transcript or go back, ask questions, whatever I need to do to kind of catch up, so to say. It's kind of like whenever you were in college or high school and you would listen to the lecture or your teacher's directions, like sometimes you would have to go back, right? And kind of like fill in the dots, or connect the dots and fill in the blanks. And so that's kind of what I meant by passively listening. And it's a lot easier said than done to pay attention, even just somebody who does not suffer or does not have ADHD. But it's a lot easier said than done to pay attention, especially in this virtual world where you can turn your camera off, you can have a side conversation, you can, respond to emails, you can work on another project, whatever it is. It's like multitasking. It's like a multitasker's heaven working in this virtual world, right? But we are seeing some repercussions from that, especially in terms of active listening and good communication skills. Many of us have less attention span than we probably think, and we tend to distract away very easily. If that is the case for you, you have to practice some exercises to help you hold your attention to the speaker. If you can do mind games or puzzles that keep your attention, are a great place to start. A lot of people do meditation, and meditation is a great tool that can help us retain our focus and full attention. I personally do meditation because I tend to be a high stress person, and it helps me relieve my stress, and deal, with my emotions as well. But it also helps my attention span too. So there's things that we can do to like better our attention span, and also just eliminating distractions betters our attention span. Oh, Maria, I choose to get distracted and miss number one. What is the first A, please? How on brand of you, Maria. But the first A was attitude. Yeah. So just having that attitude, that you can learn no matter like who you're talking to or what you're learning about. Even if you consider yourself an expert, you can have that attitude, and that you can still learn something from someone. Anyway, so no problem. So attention span, there are things that you can do, but I think a huge thing that you can do in the workplace is eliminating those distractions. Exit out of your Outlook, exit out of your email. When I tell people I do that, they're like, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. I've never even thought of that, of turning on my automatic replies whenever I'm in a meeting or whenever I'm on a webinar that I really want to focus on. And I'm like, yeah, people have to understand that you don't just sit there at your desk for 7.5 hours a day or 8 hours a day and just stare at your email waiting for people to email you so you can respond. Oh my goodness, I keep doing this. I'm so sorry. But yeah, people, they are so surprised when I tell them that, but I think it's, Maria, I set auto replies religiously, but don't turn it off. We'll turn it off. I agree. Yeah. You have to remember to turn it off. That's kind of the mishap, right? Okay. The last three A's of active listening. The third A is adjustment. Listening is being able to be changed by the other person, right? Adjustment in listening is nothing but keeping an open mind. It kind of goes along with attitude, right? To follow what the speaker conveys, even if that is difficult for you to grasp or holds no meaning. Often we listen to great leaders speaking about business or life in general. If the topic of discussion steers in a monotonous direction, we tend not to adjust and we just daydream. When we keep an open mind and we are ready to invest our time, we adapt to the situation, and in the end, we become a better listener. So just adjusting, like adjusting your expectations, maybe even like maybe you had expectations going into this webinar. No problem, Christine. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. If you had expectations going into this webinar, right? You might have thought like, oh, I'm going to learn about active listening today, and I'm going to learn, tips and tricks, or that's all I'm going to learn, whatever. And then you're like, wow, this is a lot more than I thought. Just adjusting your expectations. 3 attendees have raised their hands. Sherry and Christine and Abigail, I will get to you at the end here. Just want to let you know I saw it. So the art of listening in virtual teams, that is the big one, right? I don't know how many of you are working virtually, but maybe you were raising your hand, Abby, whenever I asked you to raise your hand earlier. Yeah, oops, sorry. No problem. But you should be able to lower your hand though. But the art of listening in virtual teams, that is kind of why I wanted to do this session, because it's such a struggle in working in this virtual world. Noisy listening doesn't work on video calls. I'll say that again. Noisy listening doesn't work on video calls, on webinars, on meetings. What do I mean by noisy listening? Surely listening isn't quiet, right? Doesn't the speaker talk and then the listener just shuts up and listens? Well, no. People have developed excellent face-to-face listening skills and have learned to use small, encouraging noises, like when you're listening to somebody and you go, mm-hmm, or uh-huh, or you like nod your head, or those nonverbals, that's noisy listening. And we do that to keep the other person talking. These noises tell the speaker that the listener is still with them, and they work beautifully in face-to-face conversations. When we are in person, right? When we're in person and I hear the other person saying like, mm-hmm, or uh-huh, or like nodding their head, I know that they're actually listening to me, and that's great. But in the virtual world, this doesn't work. They are a terrible tactic in a video meeting, because the software that tracks the noises from all the participants moves the camera and the audio to pick up that person who's making the most obvious sound, right? I think we see so many people interrupt others more so on webinars and like video calls and stuff, because the audio ends up picking up their voice, and like we're not programmed, even 2 years in to this pandemic. I don't think we're programmed to allow that like 30 seconds for somebody else to go ahead and talk. I think we're getting better, but you have to make that be conscious of that, right? A great listener who regularly deploys the mm-hmm or the uh-huh technique in a face-to-face situation, you're probably going to unwittingly find that you are disrupting the flow of a video call. I don't know how many of that have ever experienced that. Feel free to type in the chat if you have. I know I have. But you're probably going to cause the speaker's words to be lost and having precisely the opposite effect to someone that they intend, that to the one that they intended. So what should you as a good active listener do instead, right? Happily, there's another great technique that does still work. You can have your camera on, smile, and gently nod. Keep yourself on mute. If you're already someone who works hard at encouraging others, then you just need to remember to do those nonverbal things. You can type in the chat and participate that way, right? Answer those polls. Just show that you're engaged in other ways. If you're not consciously aware of sending out positive vibes when listening to others, then the chances are that on video conferences, you may be at risk of showing what we might call in the communication world a blank face. That brings me to my next bullet point, which is agape is better than a blank face. Have you ever noticed how in a meeting, in a face-to-face meeting, a speaker will often gravitate to keep talking to one particular person? Sometimes that's because that speaker is talking to their boss or they're talking to a potential client. However, where there is no power element, the speaker is probably focusing on the people who are radiating encouragement and nodding slightly or smiling or looking attentive, right? So if you've ever been in a meeting and like it's just like a presentation that they're speaking to everybody, you'll note, if you have never noticed this before, you might start to notice that the speaker tends to constantly look at the same person, and that's typically because that person is showing really good nonverbal cues that they're paying attention. That speaker is simply seeking validation that that person is actively listening by talking to these people and talking to that specific person, and not to everybody else who's just radiating neutrality or having that blank face. And it kind of shows and communicates an absence of interest. So on a video call, on a Zoom call, the issue of having a blank face or keeping your camera off can even be more pronounced from the speaker's perspective. So unfortunately, today, you're not even allowed to turn your camera on, which I do apologize for that. But in your regular workplace Zoom meetings, if you typically have your camera off, you might consider turning it on due to this, because the issue of having a blank face or just your picture can be even more pronounced from the speaker's perspective, because there's not really a chance to feel how interested you are in the content that they're speaking about. So as a listener who's interested in promoting excellent team dynamics, which I know you all are, it is our job to radiate positive sentiment while listening. If you are of classical inclination, look up the 6 words. Okay, these 6 words. Greeks used for different forms of love, and try to feel agape. That's what agape is. Agape is the Greek 6 words that they use for different forms of love. And it's a general sense of love for everybody. And in any case, making an effort to relax and soften your face and feel good thoughts about this person or this team, that's better than a blank face. That brings me to my next topic, which is pick a strategy to stay focused. And we've talked about a lot of those today, but for a person who actively wants to listen well, the first step is to give up the foolish idea that you can maintain your concentration levels while multitasking. I think everybody in this virtual world needs to give up the idea, myself included. I know there's going to be busier days than others, and you really feel like you have no choice but to multitask, and that's okay. But if you are able to, and you want to become a better active listener, it's so crucial that you give up this idea that you can maintain your concentration levels while multitasking, because you can't. However, even putting your phone aside will not necessarily stop your mind from losing focus or drifting off and missing much of what is being said. Even like setting your automatic replies on isn't going to necessarily stop your mind from thinking about like how many emails you might be getting, right? In her paper, How to Monitor Listening More Effectively, Metacognitive Strategies in Listening, Margaret Imhoff points to 3 key strategies that people can use to to improve the quality of their listening. They can use interest monitoring, which is where the listener monitors their level of focus and interest in the topic and makes an effort to re-engage when they feel themselves drifting. So when you feel yourself drifting, you like make that conscious choice in your mind to like re-engage yourself, right? Like kind of what Maria did. Honestly, that was a great way to re-engage herself, Maria. She chose to get she got distracted. She chose to get distracted. She missed the first A of active listening, but she re-engaged herself by typing in the chat and like just being honest and transparent, right? And saying, I got distracted. I missed number one. What was it again? Please. Thank you. So she re-engaged herself. She did that interest monitoring. So great job, Maria. You're ahead of the game. Asking pre-questions, the listener asks themselves questions before the conversation to identify things that they might want to know from the conversation. They can also do this during the conversation to reconnect. So kind of like typing the questions in the chat as we're going along. Or like at the very beginning when we talked about like the polls and kind of what you guys why you thought active listening was important. That was kind of you asking those pre-questions or like having that pre-engagement before we really got into like the bulk of the content. Elaborative techniques is the third strategy that Margaret wrote about in her paper to improve the quality of our listening. These require the listener to work with the material that they hear cognitively, and this might involve critiquing or analyzing the information and then synthesizing that information. So active listening, the whole active listening strategy of summarizing what the person has said and feeding it back to them in fewer words is actually like when you summarize what that person just said and then you repeat it back to them, it's an example of an elaborative technique. Okay. So you can still use this in a virtual team, but on a multi-person call, you're probably better doing it in your head. Or like if it is your chance to talk or you feel that pause, you can do it. Like I know one of the amazing things that my director does that I so envy her about, Amy Julian, if any of you are familiar with her, once somebody's done talking, she'll say like, I hear you say X, Y, and Z. Like, is that accurate? Or I'm hearing us say X, Y, and Z, right? And so she'll kind of do that, and that's an elaborative technique. The pre-questions can be like if you use asking pre-questions as a strategy to stay focused, it can be relatively easy to start doing that and adopting that and taking some time. Just take some time before your calls, like a minute, right? Or like 2 minutes before your calls or your webinars or your meetings to think about like what you want to get out of this meeting, right? Look at the agendas, right? I don't know if you're guilty of this, but sometimes I don't look at the agenda until I'm already in the meeting and then I just pull it up because my day is so crazy and hectic and I've been going from meeting to meeting to meeting to phone call to phone call to phone call and I don't have a second, right? And I just can't breathe that day. And we're going to have those days. But on the days where you do have a minute, take that minute and ask yourself, like, what am I going to get out of this meeting? What do I want to get out of this meeting? What do I need to ask this person that's going to be in this meeting? Have those pre-questions, what is the known or the unknown here? What else do I need to know? What would have to change our decision, whatever kind of the context of that meeting is. And if you find yourself losing focus, you can bring yourself back with those questions that you've asked, like remembering that you need to ask those questions or that you've already asked those questions. Of course, if you're listening well, then asking 1 or 2 questions on a call is also a great way of showing others that you've heard them. Margaret, her name, Sherry, was a Margaret. I'll type it in the chat for you. Imhoff. And her paper was How to Monitor Listening More Effectively, Metacognitive Strategies in Listening. So those are kind of some things, some listening strategies that we talked about. So next we're going to do a listening activity, but we kind of ran out of time. But I will send the list because I want to allow enough time for questions. So I will send the listening activity out to all of you, and you can do it yourself, or you can maybe do it with your team. Like if you have a team meeting coming up and you are like, this would be a really good way to kick off our team meeting, right? Like, let's do a listening activity. It's really just a story that I was going to read you. You have to listen really closely. And then I ask you a bunch of questions and you like see how much you can remember. And if you remember like 12 out of the 15, you're an excellent listener, or kind of one of those like mind game, paying attention strategy, like games that we were talking about earlier in the webinar. So I will send that out with the follow-up email tomorrow if any of you are interested in it. And I think it would be like a great time or a great way to kick off your next team meeting that you have. Okay. So next I kind of want to debrief like on this conversation, right? Here, what are some action steps? Like what have you guys taken away from this presentation? So what are you going to do after this webinar to improve your active listening skills? Like what's one thing, type in the chat, or even go ahead and raise your hand, I'll unmute you. What's one thing that you're going to do to improve your active listening skills after this webinar? Turn your email off, turn your Outlook off, turn your email off. I guess I really drove home that point that I do that, huh? I'm going to share this information at my weekly WebEx meeting. Awesome. Yeah, there's that paper. Thanks, Sherry. Not multitask. Ooh, easier said than done, Denise. But good luck with not doing that, but try to not do that. I commend you for that being your goal. Turn off your notifications, try to be in the moment, turn off your email and phone notifications. Yeah, I put my phone on silent, and sometimes that really, really makes my husband mad when he's trying to get a hold of me during the day. But some people, you know, if you have kids and stuff, you may not be able to put your phone on silent, which is totally understandable, but try not to interrupt the speaker. Yeah, Lucas, me and you both need to work on that so we can just tag team that effort of working on that together. Practice active listening. Yeah, it really is a conscious effort. Like I think when we talk about listening, it just comes like so second nature to us that we don't really think we need to learn how to listen, right? But it is such a skill. It is a transferable skill. I also need to try not to interrupt. Yeah. Abby, I'm the kind of person that I always think I have like the best ideas in the room when I really don't. So I think that's why I feel the need to interrupt, because I just want to like get it out, but I need to really focus on that. When people rarely participate, it is a red flag that they are not actively listening to the meeting. Yeah, Sherry. So maybe your goal, Sherry, could be to like lead by example and participate more, which you've definitely been participating in this webinar. So I thank you for that. Decrease noisy listening on video calls. Yeah, noisy listening. I mute, but will try not to nod my head when agreeing with what someone is saying. Be more intentional about listening, making eye contact, paying full attention, not interrupting. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I'm so excited to like just see you guys put these into action, put these goals into action. And you know, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to fall short. You're going to multitask one day. It's going to be a hectic day. But what I find in the workforce system is like the summer is a little bit more, gives us like, it's kind of a reset. I don't know if you guys feel that in your offices or in your workplaces, but for us at our center, the summer is a busy planning time, but not necessarily a busy execution time. So we really have the ability to like plan and be intentional with like things like this. So hopefully you guys can like maybe utilize your summer to do that as well. Great. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for typing in the chat and participating in that. And then the second action step question I have for you are there ways that you can become a better critical, empathetic, or comprehensive listener by utilizing some of the tools that you learned today? So like Kathy says, listen to understand and not to respond. Yeah, that's a great tool. critical listening is when we listen for knowledge, right? Empathetic listening is like listening with empathy and kind of that more emotional kind of listening, and then comprehensive listening. So are there any tools that you learned today that you're going to like take with you? And we kind of talked about like just your goals moving forward. And I mean, those within themselves, like just making those active choices are really listening. Repeat and summarize what someone said, Amy said. Yeah. I think I'm going to try, honestly, like after this webinar, I'm learning something new too, right? It's all about having that attitude that I'm never fully the expert, right? Concentrate on the more 3 A's. Yeah. Attitude and adjustment and attention. Using the live transcript to help review the content. Yeah, Anna, I do that all the time. And it really helps with my note taking, honestly. That way I don't feel like I have to take notes during a meeting as much. But I think one of the things that I'm going to try to do, Amy, to talk about your point is do what my boss does and like say what I hear. Like, this is what I'm hearing you say. Is that accurate? Right? Because I think giving people that option to just like clarify it further, because maybe that's not necessarily what they meant or what they were trying to get at, but like that's how you interpreted it. So giving them the opportunity to clarify it for you, I think will really help in the workplace. And like my boss, my director, Amy Julian's so good at doing that. And I really need to be better about that. I think that's my goal after this webinar. Abby says, I used to have a friend who used to say, I'm hearing you say ... like what your boss does. And I think it's a great way to make someone feel validated. Yeah, absolutely. Sherry, I know now what mistakes I'm making. Thanks. Well, Sherry, you know what? You have to be able to know what you're doing wrong to correct it. So I think that if that's what you took away from this webinar, it's actually like so valuable to you. And that's like how you're gonna lead by example, right, in your workplace. So I hopefully you took that with a positive context. And I mean, like I learned something too, right? I know that I can be an interrupter, like I talked about as well. So just kind of like self-reflecting is kind of what it sounds like you did on this webinar, Sherry, which is awesome. Alexa says, be a noisy listener. Chelsea, not feeling a need to respond right away, which usually leaves me constantly thinking of what to say next and not fully actively listening. I'm guilty of that too, Chelsea. Like I always, like I said, I always feel like I need to respond right away, but Rena, yes, clarification. Rosie, don't be anxious to respond. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is like a lot of people are anxious to respond. But I think maybe if you give yourself that opportunity to respond without interrupting, right? Like we were talking about writing down like your questions in the chat or writing them down on a piece of paper. Like if you come to a physical face-to-face meeting, gives your brain like that opportunity to respond, but then you like don't interrupt and you don't necessarily respond right away, right? So it kind of like that might be a really good tool that you can use, Rosie, because you won't be anxious to respond because you've like already given your brain the opportunity to respond just to yourself. And then you can ask that question or share that thought or whatever, like at the end of the meeting. Anna, someone introduced me to Otter, which takes a live transcript of meetings, and this can also help with better listening in-person meetings so I can listen better and not only be worrying about catching everything for the notes. Yeah, that's a great tactic, Anna. One of the things I used to do in college was I would actually like record my lectures of my professor. So that way I could like actively listen and then I could listen back to the lecture later and take notes on it. And it actually helped me study too, the content, right? So I would do that all the time in college. Kind of the same thing. Like I would just record it on my phone though. But yeah, that's a great tool. Maria, I will forward this presentation to the team I work with for folks that did not join today. Great info. Thanks. Thank you so much, Maria. So we have about 8 minutes left. I have all these resources here, podcasts, articles, training tools that's going to come out with, and they're all linked. Some of this one of these podcasts, It's the listen notes one is really good. So, if you take a walk in the middle of your workday, go like walk around your office building or campus or wherever you work at. Like I like to walk around campus, or I'll take my dogs on a walk, my lunch hour. Sometimes I like to listen to these podcasts that have to do with the workforce system or like transferable skills like this. So feel free to check these resources out. This all will be on the presentation that will be sent out to you tomorrow. And then there's some training tools as well that you can definitely access, like for your team. If you want to bring any of this into your team, please do so. Send out the recording. Absolutely. So now we just have time for questions. We have about 7 minutes. If there's any questions or just like comments that you guys want to say, you guys have participated so much. I can definitely tell that you are actively listening to this presentation. I extremely appreciate it. I know it's hot out today and it's a beautiful summer day. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on this webinar with me and just listen to the content that I have. So hopefully you took something from it and were able to self-reflect and kind of learn a little bit something better for yourself and your workplace and how you can improve and kind of lead by example in your workplace with your coworkers. So any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or raise your hand. Everybody says they are leaving. Thank you. Bye, everyone heading out. Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria, for listening. Yeah, this sounds like a simple subject, but affects us in many ways. It absolutely does, Sherry. Mark, thank you as always, Kirsten. Excellent information and recommendations. Thank you, Mark. I didn't know you were on today. Rena, great presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. So many thank yous. You guys are making me feel so validated. Great active listening. I look forward to reviewing the resources. Yeah, absolutely. These are some great resources. Thank you so much, everyone, for your positive feedback. I really appreciate it. Again, you'll receive that follow-up survey tomorrow morning. So feel free to take that as well if you want to hear more topics like this. Great presentation. I did get distracted for a minute because I received some bad news, but I didn't leave the presentation. It was great. Oh, well, I'm so sorry to hear that, Denise. I hope everything is okay. And I'm glad that you were still able to stay on with us. I'm looking forward to doing the listening activity to see how I do. Yeah, Kathy, it's actually, you'll have to have somebody else like read it to you to see how you do, but it's honestly kind of like a reality check. I'm looking forward to doing the listening activity to see how I do. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Go ahead, feel free to log off. I'll stay on here for a little bit, but have a great rest of your day. Go out, take a walk. If it's not too hot where you're at, it's like 97 here today where I'm at. So not a good day for me because I'm wearing long sleeves and long pants because I have this poison oak. So I can't really go outside. So go outside for me, right? Enjoy the weather and enjoy your summer. And thank you so much. Take care, everyone. I'm going to stay on here if anybody has any questions, but feel free to log off. Have a great day. Okay, I see everybody. Oh, Ivy Dry is a must have for poison oak. Great presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I did go get a steroid shot and I got some oral steroids and steroid ointment from the doctor yesterday. I went, thank goodness. So I'm hoping that's going to help me. It was unbearable. I couldn't last anymore. I had to go to the doctor. So thank you so much, everyone. I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and log off. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.